Stanley Kubrick, native New Yorker, usually held up as one of the great filmmakers. All films, we stand on the shoulders of giants, but when we think of those giants, often one of them is Stanley Kubrick. Said to have genius-level IQ, above 200, interested in chess and photography at the time. I know we all have IQs over 200 in this room, so we're among like-minded individuals. Very smart man, innovator, a lot of filming techniques and technology involved in film production. He brings into the mainstream with his movies. He is one of those rare directors who's like a jack of all trades. Not only is he very involved in his films, notoriously had final cut on most of his films after a certain point, but he made multiple movies of just different genres that are each held up on their own as great films. And one of them is perhaps the film we look tonight, a comedy, Dr. Strangelove. And then I put that note, Godfather of Conspiracies, because I really think a lot of the conspiracy theories that are around today go back to things people have forgotten, came first in Stanley Kubrick movies. And whether or not those ideas preceded them is a different story, but the reflection and projection of those ideas, I definitely can trace it back to him a little bit. And then if you know anything about Kubrick, you know that he's famous for saying just one more take. The man, for a while, held the record on a number of takes, supposedly made it very difficult to work with. A lot of actors struggled with the multiple takes, and Peter Sellers was one of them. So with that, we're going to be talking about Dr. Strangelove, co-written, like most things Kubrick directs, but also directed by Kubrick, based on the book Red Alert by Peter George. Comes out in January of '64. It's delayed because of the Kennedy assassination. I believe it first screens on the day of the assassination, and that's why we edit that line, Good Weekend in Vegas, from the original Good Weekend in Dallas. Modest budget, went on to be commercially and critically successful. I consider this a nightmare comedy. You can call it something else if you'd like. It's definitely a satire of the Cold War, but maybe more than that. Peter Sellers in 3 roles, as we were saying before class started, right? That was one of the studio's mandates, that he played multiple roles due to the success of that in Lolita, Kubrick's movie before that. Often ranked on greatest film list or greatest comedy lists. And then if you want to do some required reading, that little box on the bottom, you could look up stuff about the Cold War, those various races we did at the time, Kennedy in Cuba, his assassination, Operation Paperclip, and also fluoride. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about fluoride because I'm not sure I understand fluoride. I know the dentist makes me spit it out when I go to him. And yeah, original poster for this movie, but often a lot of people, when we think of it, right, it's that character of Dr. Strangelove, the character that's absent from the novel that it's based on, that really kind of steals the show for a lot of people. But I venture a guess that we each probably have a character that does that for us in this movie, and maybe it's not Dr. Strangelove. All right, so here's kind of what I'm thinking with this movie. We've talked before about nuclear weapons. We've seen it with Godzilla, right? And this is that same thing from a different angle, right? So someone once said, a good comedy starts by making you laugh, but always ends by making you care. So that's something that we should maybe keep in mind as we talk about this. Is this a good comedy given that definition? Technology is becoming more and more involved in our lives. It is creating tools and making our lives easier. We're getting more weapons, right? Technological advancement. In theory, us amassing nuclear weapons as a country is supposed to keep us safe, but that is really frightening. And entire generations of people in this country, if not around the world, right, hid under their desks in school from the nuclear bombs, did those kind of drills. And what that kind of creates is this culture of fear. But again, those bombs were thought they were going to protect us and keep us safe from our enemies, and it becomes this really scary reality. So to me, this movie is all about paradox, and I don't think that's something that's kind of obtuse to see. There's a lot of paradox in this movie, and I really think it's saying that we should fear the very things that are said to keep us safe. And I say things, right, because I think sometimes those are institutions and individuals as well. Right, so we'll think about that as we move forward. And we're going to start it off hearing a little bit about that Doomsday Machine and meeting Dr. Strangelove. I will preface this by saying there's about like 5 seconds where there's no audio, but it's okay. I don't know what happened. I should have cut it sooner. So pretend you know what he's saying here. Thank you all for being here while the rest of the world is hunkering in their bunkers to hide from the coronavirus. You guys have braved the storm. Remember, we're here for a good time, not a long time. And if anything bad happens to you, you can bill LMC TV. I got it approved. They'll cover your medical bills. And we're live, so like it's true now. All right.
Matt's gonna have words with you.
No, it's fine. I cleared this beforehand. And I really just want to say, as the rest of the world hunkers in their bunkers, and that was all. That was the whole reason for making the joke. Welcome back. So, technology. I think the Doomsday Machine is a really good example of technology. The fact that it's automated is an addition that Kubrick adds in this movie, right? In the novel Red Alert, it is not automated. It involves the premier of Russia pressing the button to activate it. So I think that's really significant and important to talk about. The other thing I want to point out before we start talking about some of the other technology is like there's a lot of telephones in this movie. A lot of telephones, like almost every scene, every shot, like someone's on the phone. And I think that's really important because like in addition to weapons, technology is weaponry, technology is also used for communication, right, and the spread of information. And that can break down, but it can also be used to our betterment. And I would venture a guess that like that is a good use of technology, where around the world we are able to communicate in this film via technology. So that's my little spiel on phones, but let's talk about some tech stuff. So we can talk about the production of the movie if you'd like, some of the difference in visual shots or the elements in the film that are representative of technology. But also I want you to think about like the art of deterrence is producing fear in the minds of individuals, right? And how that's really a direct statement about the weapons that they have. So technology you see that's important to helping us or hurting us in this movie, and maybe what it's saying about, weapons or technology in general. Oh, yes, sir.
It's something I just thought about watching that scene again, is that, the Doomsday device is designed to end nuclear war because it is making nuclear war impossible once you announce it. So, everybody developed nuclear weapons in the 40s and after Hiroshima to deter the other country from using them against them, which worked because nobody ever shot any of them against each other because they were afraid of what would happen if it came back. But because each side kept escalating, there had to be a natural end, and the Doomsday device is a natural end. It makes all nuclear war impossible if there's a Doomsday device, because if anybody launched anything, it would end the world, so nobody could ever do it again.
Yeah.
But didn't take into account the fact that there might be human error in the announcement date.
Right.
Which is the only error in the movie.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. If he had just announced not waited till Monday, because you know how much he loves surprises.
It's not entirely clear that Jack Ripper would have done all this if he had known there was a Doomsday device.
Right.
Presumably, because he wanted to win the war, I think. I'm trying to remember now. He was crazy, but he was crazy because he wanted to end the communist threat, not because he wanted to end all human life. Human life. So if he knew that he would automatically lose the war, he wouldn't have done it. So I think that whole concept sets up the fact that there's no way to end nuclear war once you've let it out of the box.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be some sort of human, no matter how superlative the weapon gets or the deterrent gets, no matter how fearful you get of it, there's always going to be a human error component because the systems are designed by humans.
Yeah.
Designed by humans. So there's always a human flaw in it. The technology is only going to get to the level of where humans are using it, not to. So you can't build a perfect deterrent.
Yeah.
Because the humans have to implement it and use it, so it won't ever be used perfectly.
Right.
At least from that scene.
Okay. No, I think that's a really interesting point. And yeah, Ripper is not trying to kill everyone. He's like, I crossed the line, and now if you don't want everyone to die unknowing about the Doomsday Machine, you need to continue the second wave of the attack. You need to send the rest of them so that we wipe out all of Russia, and Russia won't be able to retaliate.
We'll get our 10% acceptable losses.
Right, yeah.
Which is what George C. Scott says at some point. If we launch now, we could probably get away with 10 or 20 million dead.
Yeah, that's all.
Dead. So we should go for it. Which is so him and Jack Ripper are basically
And they're both
They both
military.
understand. They
Yeah.
both understand the position. That was the normal position that people had. Mm-hmm. They even have it in the movie War Games.
Well, why amass all these weapons? Why have this this ongoing conflict with the Soviets if you never intend to end it? You know, like at some point you got to do something. And I think both of those people from the military are itching to do something, right? Like there's been a talk and waiting and building and strategizing. So it's finally time to go. I don't know if I skipped the clip before we saw it, but one of my favorite lines is when Bud, man, what's his last name? Turgensen says like, man, I really wish we had one of those Doomsday Machines. All right, like as Strangelove is talking about what's so horrible about it. Like so, even there you see it's like that competition as well. Other thoughts, other ideas, or you want to respond or disagree? You want to think about bombs then? Yeah.
On a totally technical point too. I noticed that the last time I just watched this like a week ago. But when Dr. Strangelove rolls up, he does the camera angle between the leg of the Russian and the American, and he comes right down the middle of the two of them.
Yeah, you're right.
So he kind of makes sure that you know that like Dr. Strangelove is like an ex-Nazi rocket scientist, or he's like representing that sort of, what was the name of that operation?
Operation Paperclip.
So he comes rolling in and like he makes it really clear just from the camera angle that this is like both sides' fault. Like he's not blaming the Russians for the Doomsday device. He's like, we had our, and that's where he's announcing that we also had a Doomsday project and created the fear in men that they had to make one in the first place.
What's the point if you don't tell anyone? Speaking of camera angles, there are two different cameras used in the filming of this movie, and I think if you think about it, you could probably figure out what's used for what. Because visually, this movie is a paradox. You've got really stable, smooth shots in some scenes, and then you've got a lot of like handheld, shaky shots that are almost reminiscent of like war footage. The detonating of the nuclear bombs are real test footage of real nuclear bombs going off. But the war room has got that clinical, everything's still, nothing's moving, the camera's there. Versus like them storming the military base, trying to take control back from Ripper and get the codes, like it looks like war footage. And like there's those two visual realities being presented to us just with the cameras. But anything else? Anyone want to think about nuclear weapons or weapons in general? You want to think about B-52 bombers or something else? Yeah.
Okay, I have to do this anecdotally because my information that I'm working from regarding the missile gap and the space gap and everything else does strictly come from parody in Mad Magazine.
Okay.
So
Best source I hear.
well, no. I mean, if it was in the American reality at the time, Mad parodied it. So it must have been a huge thing at the time that, you know, we're a megaton behind. Oh my God, we've got to, jack this thing up and get ahead of them again. So that part is legitimate there. And I really don't know the date that the term mutually assured destruction came to be. And that was the point at which people, I think, realized, by the way, once you start, there won't be anything left.
My guess would be the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I believe, yeah, I think you're onto something there because like the military guy's book is major cities in megadeaths or whatever, and that is from the same article that first uses the term like mutually assured destruction. So I know that like it's something that like like the American, if not global culture is aware of, but Kubrick is also aware of it as well. So the deterrence thing, mutually assured destruction, like that should be enough of a deterrent, and yet in this movie it's not, you know?
Well, it's not because you can't afford it.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, it collapsed their economy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
So it turns out in '91 he was right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Took a while.
It took a while. That's why the Doomsday device he said was cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're even onto the peace race, you know, he mentions, and like detente, we're not at detente yet. So like in a lot of ways we're, I don't know, predicting, anticipating some of the like shit patterns we're gonna see, right? The fall of the Soviet Union. What do you think they talk about in their meetings? You think they, talk about marks and whatever. No, they pull out analytical, spreadsheets and they go over the data. Yeah. Okay. You wouldn't be human if you didn't have strong opinions about nuclear warfare. Anybody have some strong opinions?
Well, getting back a little bit on
Yeah.
the cameras that are used.
Uh-huh.
Whenever they're in the war room, a lot of the shots are like, I think they're like all wide-angle camera.
Yeah, we have, it's a lot of zoomed out, yeah.
From a distance.
But even like shots that traditionally would be like a single shot or a two shot are filmed with the whole table in the background. Or just people walking in back of like the action that's actually taking place. And with respect to the amount of power that this room has, that none of these people that you're forced to be aware of all the time, nobody's doing anything about it. You've got two guys like sort of getting nervous about it and talking about like how futile it is to really like do anything to stop this. Because we've built this weapon. There's nothing really we can do at this point.
Yeah.
And it's not just two people. It's you've got the entire world, the entire room, like the smartest, the brightest, and the most powerful Americans.
No, you're
Who are
right.
just kind of sitting on their butt.
Acting like idiots, one might argue, right? Like,
Well,
or
you
being
see,
portrayed as buffoons.
There's a pratfall, and
Yeah.
he like
That's a good
saunters
part,
his way
too.
back to the table, and the whole time he's in the shot.
Yeah, no, you're right. Chopping on that gum.
Was that ad-lib?
Yeah, and Kubrick leaves it in. So, from what I have read, a lot of, it's George C. Scott, right? A lot of what was used in this movie was what he thought were just like the warm-up takes, right? The silly takes, and then he did serious takes, and Kubrick went and used the silly takes that the guy didn't think were going to be used for the movie. So like that, and he was really mad about it supposedly afterwards. He now says like he thinks it's one of his best performances, but at the time he was really critical and said he'd never work with the guy again because it was like dishonest that he didn't know how those shots were being used. He went and saw the movie and was like supposedly surprised by what he saw. Like, oh, you made me look like a fool. But yeah, I think like it's one of the greater performances.
Turns out okay.
It's one of the great non-Peter Sellers performances in this movie. Yeah. Last thoughts about technology. Anyone want to say anything else? Anyone want to think about phones? Yeah, go ahead.
How technology
Yeah, please.
failed between the human intervention of everything going on with the nuke, and then I'm just even seeing it was the captain, whoever, that trying to make a phone call because all the lines went down, and
Yeah.
he like, and as again, as much as technology moves, humans forward, it's still we rely more and more on it. So all it takes is just that point of failure becomes even greater because we're just really dependent on a knife's edge.
Yeah. No, I can see it. And that scene where in the end he's trying to make Mandrake's trying to use the phone and he doesn't have enough change, right? And like, well, if this doesn't work, you're gonna have to answer the Coca-Cola company. There's a lot there with like, yeah, how much do we depend on that? And now we charge for something that like our lives depend on. It comes down to pocket change and whether you have enough, and that's gonna determine life and death on this planet. It's a resource, right? And we put a price tag on it. I don't know. Yeah.
You also are not allowed to charge for phone calls to 911.
That's true. I've heard that.
So
But if you call the
stuff like
president,
that.
apparently they charge you.
Yeah.
911 is a different story, but
Yeah.
Person-to-person call.
that's them trying to make sure you don't prank call the president in the middle of the night, I guess. Yes?
In the plane, aren't they also unable to contact?
Yeah.
They're
Because
unable
of
to
the-
because of whatever the order was.
Mhm.
They're unable to contact the plane to tell them to not follow through
Yeah.
with the order.
Mm-hmm. And then even once they get the code and they can actually communicate with them, that part of the plane has been destroyed,
Yeah.
right? So they can't communicate with them because technology has failed. Yeah. I want to talk about the people on the plane at some point,
Also-
but yeah.
Not only the
It's
technology,
interesting.
The order was the technology was to be shut off. It's attack plan R.
Right.
So that they had to turn off their.
They switch the receiver so they'll only accept some kind of specific transmission, but the transmission has to be sent the cancellation code, that 3-letter phrase. But even once they get the code, right, like they can't do it because they got shot. Yeah. And part of the plane is not working. The self-destruct thing has detonated itself, and that's what took out the receiver.
It's a self-destruct.
Self-destruct. And I noticed that when they're testing it earlier in the movie. All right, last thoughts? Technology? All right. Oh, can't update Chrome.
Oh no.
Fine.
So much for technology.
All right, so let's think about politics and let's think about the Cold War. And I know they didn't call it the Cold War at the time, so I don't think when this movie's being made, I don't think anyone's calling it the Cold War, but I could be wrong. I think that's one of those in retrospect we gave it that label. Like World War I was the Great War, and now we call it World War I because the sequel happened. But let's. This is again a great scene. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I think it's good, and I think you really see like Peter Sellers' talent. But also think about politics and think about how politics is displayed. I think that's a great scene. I think Sellers does a really great performance, and I often try to think about what's being said on the other line. And I think you could do a lot of funny ad-libs with that.
A technical question.
Yeah.
When we were watching the movie, did he have somebody else talking in the phone?
I don't think
to him,
so.
Or did he completely do that like from memory
I think he ad-libbed it also.
He ad-libbed
Yeah,
it.
from what I've read, most of his lines are ad-libbed.
I was just wondering, 'cause
So
I
he's
thought-
got like a rough sketch, and he's like, oh, well, I know I need to talk to the president of Russia, so I'm gonna.
Premiere.
Yeah, so he knows kind of what he needs to do, but a lot of it's like riffing.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's like, oh, wait, hold on, you faded out. Like, I think it's really impressive seeing just how he kind of navigates through it. But there was probably 157 takes of it, you know? Like, probably 157.
Right.
So, who knows? Like, all right, so let's think about politics as like we are gearing up for a presidential election within this year. Like politics is on a lot of people's mind. I know Super Tuesday just passed and all that other stuff. We have the Democratic primaries happening. But before we get to now, let's think about politics of this movie, and let's think about like the impact of politics, how I guess a politician or members of the government are portrayed, international politics. And then maybe we'll get to like parallels in our world now. But I don't know. So what do you think about how Russia and the United States are portrayed in this movie? What do you think it's saying? Ideas, thoughts? Yes.
Well, off the bat, it kind of just seems like it's like my grandmother and her sister-in-law having a conversation on the phone. It
Talking about nuclear war?
talking about anything.
Okay.
It seemed like it was like a very slowly productive conversation.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives the idea that they're kind of in on whatever's going on together. They're friendly, whereas you might imagine that they might not be. They have nuclear wars or plans placed on one another, but they're just chit-chatting on the phone.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like anxiety trying to get him on the phone. Oh, we got to call. And then once they're on the phone, it's very cordial. Yeah, I noticed that. And it is very like conversational, and it's unexpected because these are enemies, you would think. Oh, well, you know, I like talking to you on the phone. Oh, yeah, I could call just to say hello. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how sort of something about what you said. How they seem like it's not going anywhere. Sort of like they're like immature, and that you think them to be like established people running countries, and then people who have responsibilities, and like people who have so much weight in the world are fighting in the war room. You know, they're like they're doing the fights like the slapping fights like.
It's only the
Yeah.
Two Stooges.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think that's a really good point because it is very unexpected. Just like the phone conversation is a little unexpected, like the behavior of these adults, this behavior of the decision makers who are guiding the direction of our country in terms of international policy is like met with a lot of immaturity. And yeah, I'm not quite sure that inspires a lot of confidence. Let's go here and then there.
Whenever I was looking at, whenever there was like a president scene, all I could think was, how did this guy get elected?
He was
President
probably the lesser
Merkin
of two
Muffley?
evils.
Merkin Muffley? I mean, he's obviously
Or he was a vice
strong
Good
man.
intentions.
Yeah. Yeah.
His
that's-
opponent was so awful, he was the better choice.
He ran unopposed, I assume.
What year was this? 1964?
64,
It
yeah.
was filmed while Kennedy was the president.
Filmed while Kennedy is in office, yes.
No, you see, the difficulty is that he has more hair than Eisenhower.
Yeah.
But, you know,
He does
But,
have a
but
bit
less
of
than
a,
Kennedy, so.
he's in the middle of hair.
They do make a Democrat comment about him at one point. I think it's the flight crew on the bomber. So like at least that's his political party if it's worth anything.
Well, yeah,
But
in 1964, I don't think the Democrats were as pro-nuclear weapons and war and
I
anti-communist.
think everyone was. Yeah.
Right, everybody that was not a political division between the parties.
Right. Especially if you remember like Red Scare is 1950s, right? And this is more than a decade after. So a lot of that fear and paranoia about the communist threat has not gone away. They could be hiding among us. Bay of Pigs is the year before us, that's true. Cuban Missile Crisis. And that's a moment when the world comes really, really close to nuclear annihilation, and then the boat turns back, right? But it's kind of, I would think, responding to that, yeah.
And along with what they were saying, like, I think the tone of the conversation matches the content of the conversation, because he doesn't know the phone number to call when a mistake like this happens.
Yeah. Who should we call?
Like the president, I'm sure in real life, they know who to call.
You would
But
hope.
like he's portraying it like in maybe in 1964 they didn't.
Yeah,
But he has to ask him for the phone number who to call.
yeah.
So the whole tone of the conversation matches with like the content is that they don't even know who to call if there's an accident. Like
But neither does the premier of Russia. Well, like he knows who to call, he just doesn't know the number. Just call information and ask, it'll be
That's
fine.
what my staff is for, you know?
Be careful, Mr. President. I think he's a little drunk. Like he's a man of the people, but he's still a man. There's
he's at his girlfriend's.
Yeah, he's at his girlfriend's. Could you turn the music down? So, what's scary about politics in this movie? Building off of what Ryan was saying about like the immaturity of these characters. What's scary? What's scary about our leaders and decision makers being immature? I don't know. Is it scary? Do we like that? We want that? Yeah, what do you think?
Well, the really scary thing to me was he was like, well, I'm not, I'm just as sorry as you are. I mean, I'm like, it was like, can you top this? And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like,
always a
"Please."
competition.
It was a competition. Mine is bigger.
Yeah. And on some level, right, there's that happening in this movie too. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the conversation also sets up a dichotomy between the strength of the weapons they're talking about and how like they're just humans. The conversation actually humanizes him and the Russian premier. They're just two people. But between the two people, they have the power to eliminate the planet.
Yeah.
But they're still not any more than just people. And they've lost control of a weapon that could destroy the planet.
Yeah.
And they're still just having a human conversation. So it
They
shows
may
that
be in charge, but they're not in control.
they're still just humans. You
That's
can't
a
be
really
in
good
charge
point.
of the size. It sets up the size difference between their ability as people versus the size of the weapons they have.
We took it too far. We've reached too far. And I think you said earlier, right, once we let it out of the bottle,
Like Terminator.
like Terminator. Or Frankenstein.
Or Frankenstein.
Pandora.
No. As long as someone's keeping a running tally, because someone else asked, does he talk about Frankenstein every time? And now I'm just doing it for fun. It's like Tarantino and the feet. I'm just doing it for fun now. Yeah? Thoughts? No. Okay. You got anything back there? Because I can't really see you. No. You let me know, though. Wave at me. All right. Do you see parallels between this film and our own world?
Yes.
Okay. How? Why? I don't know. Is nuclear fear, competition still a real concern?
From the
Or
outside,
yeah, go ahead.
from the outside, it does often feel that politics and things like this are a comedy from our leaders.
Yeah, like a absurdist comedy, maybe.
It does feel like an absurdist comedy right now, yeah.
Okay. So it's possible that maybe this movie reveals that like the people we put in charge, like even still, right? We haven't learned that lesson. Maybe we're still putting immature people in charge, or we're still fallible to making a mistake like that. And again, I'm not talking about anything in particular. It's just the possibility of it happening, I guess. Yes, and then yes?
I was just gonna say, like, there is starting to be a weapons race. I mean, Russia kind of disappeared in '91,
Yeah.
but now the newer weapon systems they're talking about are like the hypersonic missiles, which go like more than 5 times the speed of sound or something like that, or more than 7, and they're launched from space that would destroy early warning detection systems or defeat them. So it's still in the background, like people hear about it, but nobody gets like panicky about it. Right?
Yeah.
That's not here yet, but it doesn't not exist between the two countries. I mean, there's still people sitting at the Pentagon today, developing and trying to build up a weapons gap with China. And maybe it's a lot more technical now, like who can put a virus and shut down somebody else's power grid.
Sure.
There was a lot of talk about that with Israel and Iran when they had that power grid failure in Iran, and
Okay.
they blamed it on the Israeli technology people sending stuff. And there's still weapons designs like this, and they can still get out of control, and it still happens. It just doesn't have the sort of like overarching fear because I don't know, it's drowned out by other. I don't know why, but it doesn't. It's there. It's still there. Like all the stuff that's going on in this movie still happens every day.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like it in the news all the time.
And I'm like sort of reminded every couple of years, like North Korea does a missile test, and everybody like freaks out for a second, or like comments are made, ultimatums are given. You know, they test the missile, and then the world keeps spinning. Did you want to go? And then
Well, what I was going to say was, it's not so much an actual physical weapon. Now they're playing a mental game. When you think about it, you've got the bots and the social media, and they're just sort of like setting us against each other and standing back and watching. So it's like they're stirring the shit and then watching the outcome. Pardon my French.
no, okay. I mean, you caused that child to leave with that language. It's okay. He'll be back. Yeah.
As opposed to having the grand film footage of the 50 megaton bomb, the 100 megaton bomb being popularized on TV, newsreels, whatever was current at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there you had a more tangible, this is what this means. Whereas if we say, well, it was a computer virus that, caused the centrifuges to malfunction and destroy themselves. What's that mean?
Right. Yeah.
But I saw the big bombs!
Saw the big explosion. That's true.
You've also got the electromagnetic pulse weapons, which you
EM
can launch in
EMP.
space. They're going to render all of our technology kind of useless. Problem is, it renders their technology useless too.
Yeah, and you see it in the Matrix, right? That's humanity's greatest weapon until Neo against the machines is the EMP, right? But it's going to disable your ship if you use it. So there's a bit of that mutually assured, I guess, electronic destruction at least, yeah. Technological destruction.
You're supposed to be able to handle that with vacuum tubes, though,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah,
Something.
But who has vacuum tubes now except
worked
for
that
like?
well.
Only the
Escape from
Russians.
LA.
They
Escape from
bought
LA is
off,
the
they
other one
bought
I
off
think
all
of
the
with the
RCA
EMP.
displays.
In case you don't know, spoilers for Escape from LA. It came out in '87 though. Also, he surfs in it. It's not very good. But Snake Plissken lets the EMP get detonated at the end and puts everyone back to the Stone Age because he's like, well, at least now we all kind of go back to zero and we can have a fresh start.
And he's allowed to now smoke.
Also, Fight Club. That's when they take out the credit card things. It's not EMP, but they're trying to erase debt, and that's a digital idea, right? Like your debt really just exists as ones and zeros on computers now, right? And if you make it go away, then no debt. All right. Anything else? Anyone want to poke the bear with any of this? Yeah, the Russian bear. Why not? I mean, we're going live to Russia, right? That's Vidania. Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving onwards and upwards. We're going to think about mad science for a second. So instead of showing you a Dr. Strangelove clip, I'll show you a different character who maybe is our mad scientist, or maybe there isn't one, or maybe everybody is, or maybe we're all Frankenstein's monsters. I don't know. But I kind of want to talk about crazy stuff for a second or two. So let's hear about, water. Just because I'm pretty sure I like the performance of General Jack Ripper in this, and there's something hypnotic about it. Yeah.
No, but I like the fact that at one point, Sellers breaks the fourth wall and gives a big wide eye to the screen directly. And you're going, okay.
Okay.
This does mean to you what it means to the rest of us. Very nice.
Yeah, he's like, we know what we're doing. Okay. A lot of the movies we've watched and talked about kind of always remind me of a movie we haven't watched and talked about. And until I convince someone to let me watch and talk about that movie, I'm going to keep talking about that movie unconnected to other things. So let's talk about Frankenstein for a second. Third time. So a lot of, oh, you can't cut it off. All right, I see, when I made the font bigger. Okay, a lot of these fears, a lot of these patterns in these movies are very reminiscent of 1930s Frankenstein, well, you know, man creates something via technology, it gets out of control, reaps the consequences, hubris is dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. And I see that in this movie on some level, right? Something has created a system a technological system that is bringing the world to the brink of destruction, right? And I'm wondering who's responsible for that, and like who the movie perhaps points the blame and puts the responsibility on this person's shoulders. And I think it's easy to say Dr. Strangelove, but I think we could also consider some of the other characters in this and think about who's the creator and what's their creation, right? Because I think we can pretty much say every movie is Frankenstein. Yes, prove it.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
So when you watch this movie, you kind of think that maybe this guy's crazy, and where does the responsibility lie in this whole breakdown? And, like, at the beginning, I said maybe the president's a kind of a good guy, but maybe the president's like the worst guy, because the reason a guy like this thinks fluoridation is the problem is because the politicians constantly talk about how bad the Russians are, despite the fact that when they actually have a conversation, they're actually just pleasant to one another, and they're having a normal conversation.
Yeah, it's a show.
But when he gets elected, I'm sure he's saying the communists are the worst. They're trying to do all this stuff. There was like the John Birch Society or wherever they were. They were spreading all these conspiracy theories about fluoridation and whatever.
And I know some towns like arrested you if you drank like tap water, or fined you, and later, I don't know, we can go find the internet later, but there was like things they tried to put in place to combat what they thought was going on.
And so he knows about Plan R, and ultimately launches this knowing of Plan R. But at some point, I guess George C. Scott tells the president, he's like, "Well, you signed this rule."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I don't remember."
Yeah.
Well, that's not a good answer to like, I signed an irretrievable plan to start nuclear war, and I didn't remember doing it.
Yeah.
And then a guy like him he's not really the impetus behind the failure here. He's an inevitable piece. Like, there's always going to be a crazy person, but if you're in charge of nuclear weapons and you're the president or the group of guys in the war room, you shouldn't ever have a plan that could result in this sort of failure. He's not really like the impetus of the problem. He's sort of an automatic assumption. You always have a crazy general that wants to go further. Like, what's his name? The guy who's like, kill them all, let God sort him out, the Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
The famous general, I can't remember, LeMay, Curtis LeMay.
Okay.
So he was like a general, I think he's probably premised on LeMay a little bit.
Could
like,
be, yeah.
You're always going to have a General LeMay who wants to win the war at all costs.
Well,
but you probably
Patton-
should have a plan that could do that.
I know Patton, like with Korea or something, was like, let's nuke Korea. Oh, MacArthur, yeah. It was like, let's just nuke it and like not have a war, a long drawn out war.
To drop nuclear weapons all over Japan until there was nobody left.
Our military suggestion is, yeah, let's just go with the Ripper's plan at this point. There's nothing we can do to stop it, so let's just do what he wants. And there was one more thing, but maybe it'll come back to me. Other thoughts? Do you agree what he's saying, that maybe Ripper's just a product of a system? Oh, I remember. The president questions, like, I thought the test we put in was going to vet out all the crazy people, you know, and I'm really disappointed with it. And he's like, well, you know, just one bad thing shouldn't ruin the whole program. So, like, yeah, he's like, hoped that we wouldn't put people in charge, created some kind of screening process to weed out the crazy people.
It's called extreme vetting.
Yeah, like we're vetting these individuals, but still, you know, you're gonna have crazy people everywhere. And I think when he starts explaining it, like, you're like, okay. And then it gets increasingly crazier, right? Where it's like, yeah, a lot of people are just kind of like frustrated with this situation. And a lot of people think war shouldn't be left up to politicians. And you're like, okay, all right. And then we get to the water stuff and you're like, oh, you're crazy. But is he? I don't know.
Well, I think if you take the piece of paper that has the letters, what are the letters? Something
Purity of essence.
Purity of essence.
Peace on earth. POE.
Yeah. I mean, he's great. You can kind of see he's kind of been.
He's a flat earther.
He's certainly a flat earther, but
He's an anti-vaxxer.
he's had some sort of mental illness, at least
Yeah.
for the last week, and he's been thinking about it and writing notes on it, and you can kind of see the madness of this person on the paper.
No, absolutely. It's like a crossword he makes almost with all of it, and it's like he's making his own. There's no boxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a crazy person's journal. It's the killer in Seven's diaries, you know? It's like, whoa. Is it Dr. Strangelove's fault then? I mean, maybe it's the president's fault, according to
The president
Greg.
hired Dr. Strangelove.
It's true.
Dr. Strangelove is a Nazi. And he was
Former
hired by-
Nazi, former Nazi.
And he
We
was-
had a pope that was a former Nazi too. You know, it's people can be Nazis and then put that behind them, maybe.
Yeah, but he was a Nazi scientist who was building weapons for the Nazis, and the Americans hired them.
Yeah, that's true. All right, good point.
Well, if they didn't, the Russians would, so there you go.
You gotta get them before the other side does.
Yeah, I think the movie does a good job of saying that both of the Russians and the Americans are equally bad. I mean, the Russians don't play a big part in this because it's a movie directed to American audiences, but like, neither side is depicted as being the good guy or bad guy in this. It's just like, both of them are just failed humans.
The Russian ambassador does take some pictures again at the end when they're talking about the mine shaft. He goes over to the board and like snaps
really
some
is
more with the
fine.
watch camera.
He's as ridiculous as the Americans are.
Yeah, as paranoid, you know, as competitive, maybe. Speaking of the watch camera, right, and he had that other, like, matchbook camera, and then Ripper pulls the machine gun out of the golf bag, so there is this element of, like, hidden technology also, right? Like James Bond, like when we talked about Moonraker, it's similar almost. There's the gadgets, the hiddenness of it.
I was just thinking about the one scene in Austin Powers where she's got like the dental floss and the toothpaste, and it's like, okay, the dental floss is this, and she's like, no. It's like,
Yeah, no, this is just floss, you know. Like, okay. All
I
right.
like to keep my gums healthy.
Yeah, it's important to floss at least twice a day. But
Oh, please, after
don't
this.
have toothpaste fluoride. Does anyone want to talk about fluoride at all?
Greg
Does,
does.
does anyone want to? Anyone other than Greg want to talk about fluoride?
It's
bad for
absolutely
you.
horrible.
Okay. So yeah, I've heard of fluoridization,
Fluoridation.
but fluoridation. Thank you, sir. But I'm like Mandrake. I'm like not really clear on what it is. I know that they've put fluoride in our water
For your teeth.
For your teeth.
it was a good idea that kind of went south.
So how did it go south? Right. So just so for my own
What
personal, and
part
I'm sure the
went south?
internet wants to know too.
I'm not.
Does anybody know where the fluoride
I
fear
follow the
comes
fluoride
from?
conspiracy very tightly.
All right, Greg, tell us about it. What did Joe Rogan say? No, go ahead.
No, this is from the olden days.
Okay.
My friends in Boy Scouts.
Okay.
So fluoride is like a farm runoff, and they decided that they could put it in the water to strengthen your teeth, and they did do it around the 40s. But it might also have other side effects. But you're medicating populations without their consent when you put fluoride in the water. So it could have knock-on effects, and some people think it might have problems with heart, like
Calcification, hardening of
and-
things.
It depends. If you drink 30 glasses of water a day or one glass, you're taking 30 times the fluoride or one time. So they stopped doing it. Also, fluoride's poisonous.
Yeah, the dentist makes me
right on
spit
your
it out.
toothpaste. It says it's harmful if swallowed.
Yeah.
It is technically harmful in doses. but-
My roommate in college became a dentist, and that's what he told me. He's like, yeah, it's more concentrated. That's why we make you like spit it out. It's
yeah,
okay to
it
drink.
is good for your teeth.
Yeah.
It's not a communist plot to take over your mind.
You sure?
Presumably, I don't know how fluoride can take over your
You
mind.
know, someone that had their minds taken over would say just that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
How much water do you drink?
Not enough.
Not enough. All right. Fair.
But yeah, I mean, there was like there
survived
was like a
on
whole
top of
thing
that.
about like the communists trying to poison people,
Mm-hmm.
and it does coincide with it. But that's what I was saying. Like the president, like if you heard a presidential speech in 1959 or 1960,
Mm-hmm.
they would be talking about how the communists are trying to infiltrate the country, especially with the Red Scare.
Yeah.
And so it's an understandable like conclusion for a very small portion of the population to just completely buy into, because people still buy into every conspiracy. They
If
were
not
buying into
more
them-
so. Yeah.
if not more now with social
Yeah.
media. So it's not unheard of for people back then to just assume that like anything that they could wrap their mind around as being conspiracy could be. So that's why I was saying like, I mean, obviously his health is not the main issue with the cigar picture. That's actually impossible to do, by the way, because I smoke cigars, and trying to have a conversation with a cigar in your mouth,
It's hard.
it's impossible.
Impossible.
Because
okay.
you will literally be choking on that. Must
You,
be like
you
the
could be a ventriloquist, though. It'd be a really good thing.
It's,
you
got,
know?
it's like being a ventriloquist because you can't inhale at all while you're talking, or you start coughing.
So let's think about the creation in a different way for a second, right? Let's think about what this reality has created in terms of people, right? And let's think about the people that are more closely resembling us in this movie, who would be the flight crew or the military on the base, right? Because we're not the people sitting at that big table in the war room. If anything, we're the grunts on the ground, right? We're the common folk. So, what do you see with those people in this movie, right? How has the politics and the technology and all this other stuff affected us normals? That's still PC to say, right? Yes, and then yes.
Just sort of like when the troops are coming into the military base where the crazy guy is, the soldiers who are guarding it are like, wow, they almost look like the real things
Yeah.
to the like transport vehicles, even though they are the real thing.
Right.
Because like they've been told, oh, they're going to use fake transport vehicles to try to get close.
Yeah.
Don't believe it. They'll look real. Just don't trust it.
Yeah, no, and they believe it, right? Because
Yeah.
they were told it by someone in authority.
Yeah, and they were like, they almost look like the real thing because like they're sort of convinced that no, that's not actually what they look like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, and then yes.
Well, so you would imagine at some point this Ripper guy
Yeah.
has told everybody at the base to attack if anybody comes in, that they're dressed in costume, whatever. And you kind of imagine that you'd like have a second person that would follow up with that. And they just keep on attacking this new group that's come in, and they're attacking each other, and they're on the same side, and that nobody has questioned the whole time, like, what is happening and why are these people coming to attack us. So you kind of get the idea from that we're the simpletons. We're just like the simple common people.
You know, morons.
I think that's
Morons.
interesting because, like, the we are not portrayed as, like, the morons, though. It's the politicians that are really portrayed as morons. But when you think about, like, who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows the fool, right? Like, it does kind of fit with what you're saying then.
Yeah, and it's the same in the plane. They
Yeah.
are just simple guys having simple conversations in the plane. Meanwhile, they
And doing what they're told
And-
because that's what they've been trained
do
to do.
exactly, and I mean they don't know about the Doomsday Machine, but they are essentially there are lots of people that are responsible for the planet getting exploded, but at the end of the day, they the guy pressed the button and fell down, and he was the one that made the first shot, I guess.
He's also like, when the call comes in for Plan R, he's like, I told you not to joke around, right? I don't want any goofing around on my plane. Why don't you confirm this? Somebody else is like, couldn't this be a loyalty test? But ultimately, when it's confirmed, they're like, well, okay, if they're ordering us to do this, this means that the Russians must have bombed us first, and everyone you love back home is injured or dead, and we now need to go and avenge them, you know, and drop these bombs on Russia.
But wouldn't you want to like triple confirm that?
I know, but maybe we're seeing people not thinking for themselves. Yeah.
Oh, no. You're thinking as you're taught to in the military, because there is a military chain of command that says you do what the person upline in command tells you to do.
You
And
don't
if
ask
not,
questions.
right, if not, you are not loyal and you will be put in the stockade. Very simple. But my favorite part of this really was, and I had my 60s flash versus my 2020 flash, and it was, the equipment will look real. Oh, they probably bought it at auction. And I'm going, they couldn't go to the internet?
Yes.
Also, I think like you were saying how like the people, the like soldiers are morons, but then also like the politicians are morons. So like everybody's a moron. That's the whole message of the film.
Everyone. So all right, we figured it out, guys.
Yeah,
the whole
everybody-
point of the movie,
Everybody's
we're all a
stupid.
bunch of morons.
I don't.
See, you said I was being self-deprecating. Right? You see what happens? It's the youth these
I
days.
don't disagree with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do we agree? We're all a bunch of morons. Yeah.
I think that there's like a call to. I think there's more.
Let me devil's advocate for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
I think he thinks more of the lower people than he thinks of the higher people when he's making the movie.
Kubrick.
Yeah, because I mean, the other good guy in the movie is Slim Pickens, who's like my favorite character because I love Slim Pickens in every movie he's in.
Yeah.
So like he's showing that like I mean eventually the soldiers at the base stop fighting each other
Yeah.
They figure it out. Like they don't show it, but at some point they come out with white flags.
Yeah,
and
they surrender.
They surrender and they start talking to. Presumably you don't see it, but they talk to each other like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "We thought you guys were Russians. We were like they don't show it, but it happened." There's never a redeeming moment for anybody in the rest of it. Like the president's never redeemed. Dr. Strangelove's never redeemed. That war room scene. Those are all just bad guys from start to finish.
Sure.
Not bad guys, but buffoonish.
Morally ambiguous.
Morally ambiguous and
Yes.
buffoonish. But like, Slim Pickens is a hero in the movie. He's like fixing things. He's riding bombs. He's doing everything he can for America because he was told to. Now, like, he was set up to fail.
Yeah.
Because he was put in the situation by leaders that were whatever. But like, it might give you hope that maybe if you pay attention to this movie and you have the ingenuity of Slim Pickens, you might start to think, oh, maybe we shouldn't like let these people be in charge of anything anymore. Like, I think the movie's more like telling people at that level that the people in charge of you don't know what they're doing and aren't any better than you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They just happen to be higher ranked than you and convince more people to vote for them, but they're not smarter or like
more capable.
Or more capable.
Yeah. No,
I mean, he
I
fixes
think
a
that's
nuclear
something.
weapon mid-flight after being shot down. He's retargeting the place. He's like doing everything he can to win the war that he's been sent to win. It's kind of sadly comical, but it's pretty funny.
So it's like our foreign policies and development of our military create this kind of like warrior monster, right? Like where like we're almost drones, right? Who aren't thinking for themselves because of the chain of command, because you're not supposed to question things. You're supposed to do what you're told. And a good American is a brave American.
Work in the military.
Well, especially in the nuclear group. That's the whole movie War Games.
Yeah.
The whole premise of the movie War Games is that any possible chain of failure in a guy to launch a nuclear weapon when he's ordered to, they were trying to take them out.
Yeah.
Because if there's any point where somebody won't say go,
Yeah.
we have to get rid of that. And so like that's super strict. You would
We have
never
to
expect
remove
somebody
the
not
weakest
to
link.
go.
Oh, I thought you were pointing and that was
Oh,
gonna
no,
say
no,
someone
no,
there.
no, no, no. This is one of those.
Yes? Oh, no. Okay. Since it sounds like we're almost talking about human ingenuity and our problem-solving ability, I guess we should transition to that. Because in most of these movies where there are conflicts with technology, and I remind you of Star Wars: A New Hope, the humans overcome it, or James Bond Moonraker, the humans overcome whatever the technological problem is, or glitch, or limitation, and usually save the day. Right? Luke blows up the Death Star using the Force, not the targeting computer. James Bond's auto fire on the missile in Moonraker isn't working, so he's got to like just do it like with his eye, right? Yeah. And kind of get it there. And we have that also in this movie. We have human problem solving, and it comes in the final act of the film. And I realize I'm rooting for the people that are going to drop the nuclear bomb at some point, right? I want the flight crew to make it. I don't want them to kill people. I don't want them to start the end of the world, but like I'm rooting for them a little bit, right? Even though by rooting for them, I know that like, well, really they're trying to drop this bomb.
You can't not root for Slim Pickens.
I know, and that's the problem. He's just too darn charismatic. But think about it. Think about how problems are solved in this movie for a second as we watch some of the closing scenes. Our final clip of the evening. So human ingenuity, just to remind everyone, is like what separates us from the machines, right? Our ability to think outside the box and adapt and problem solve to situations that aren't pre-programmed, that we don't have explicit experience with before, right? Our schema, it's not there. You don't have something you're basing it off of, prior knowledge, right? You're able to adapt and do something new. And usually in these films that we watch, there's a statement being made about like, well, this is what still makes us superior to the machines, and like this is why there's still hope. Terminators, Matrixes, all of the aliens, all of those things. But in this movie is a little different. It's almost like it's working detrimentally against us. Our own innate ability to rise above the occasion, to keep going, right, to overcome the obstacles, ensures the end of the world in this movie, at least with the flight crew, right? With the scene with Dr. Strangelove in the end, right? Like with the bunkers and everything, the mine shafts. That also isn't solving of a problem, right? But let's think about that, and let's think about: is there any hope for us with this movie, right? Yeah, start us off.
I don't think there's any.
We've
hope.
already established we're all morons, though. So just moving forward from that, go
No,
ahead.
no, I was just thinking like there's no hope within the context of the movie.
Right.
I think the hope comes from like viewing the movie
Okay.
because at both times you're showing ingenuity here. One guy's ending the world, and the other guy's driving us all into a tunnel for the rest of 100 years, and they still can't get past the fact that there's going to be a gap between the Russians and them.
Yeah, more
Between their
things
mind
change,
shift.
more
Like
they stay the
nothing,
same.
nothing is being solved by the ingenuity. It's just pushing us further into a more distorted future reality.
They're worried about what if in 100 years they've,
Like the having of
They got
ingenuity
more
doesn't
mindsets.
advance humanity in this. The having of ingenuity is a characteristic that humans have that it's funny as a movie to root for because it's funny. But it's not. It doesn't solve the fact that the humans just have like a death wish. Or it's not fixing anything in this, and it's just driving us further to the natural human end, which is
You
that
know why?
we're all going to be living in a cave because somebody blew up the planet. So the ingenuity is about like it's constantly trying to improve the lives of people or improve the situation of people, but only in the furtherance of the human failure.
I think Einstein said, I don't know how World War III will be fought, but I know World War IV, sticks and stones, right? Like that idea that like war is always going to be there. Eventually we're going to go back to cave time, but
And
then
they'll
we'll
still be
continue
beating each other
fighting.
with sticks.
Yeah, it's dark.
There was a book like that, Canticle for Leibowitz.
Yeah, I read that.
And it like gets into the future, and everybody's back to caveman types.
Canticle for Leibowitz. It's held up as one of those top like dystopian kind of novels.
Yeah, it's set over like 3,000 years or
And
something.
we're gonna be in trouble though, because people don't know how to do stuff anymore.
Yeah.
That's what happens now.
Natural selection, it's okay.
Yeah, but that's kind of what Strangelove proposes to a degree with how we're going to fill the mine shafts.
Yeah.
Well, that's like one of the most
Yeah.
anti sort of triumphal moments of this movie is that you get to the end and their solution is a Nazi eugenicist's like wet dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to eugenics, and it's based on breeding characteristics and all this other stuff. We're gonna use a computer to select the best of humanity to survive.
How are you gonna use a computer in a mine shaft
Yeah.
with no power?
You have
So there are 90 days post Doomsday detonation, I believe, before all life, animal and plant and whatever, is wiped out. So like I've always wondered that because it's almost like the movie ends and like everyone's dead, right? But like Strangelove's proposing like we get everyone into the mines prior to death and destruction, and like I always wondered if that was like a plot hole, or it was that 90-day thing.
Yeah, I think that like right now at this point, the Doomsday device is secret. It hasn't been announced, so nobody on the planet knows everybody's going to die.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I see that. It's just the people in that room.
Only the people in the room.
Because Russia's probably gone, right?
Well, Russia's had one nuclear weapon. The Doomsday device is going to go off there first.
And that's buried somewhere under the Urals.
It's buried in Russia.
Yeah.
So I think the theory was
By the
that
time
we
they
could get
dig it up,
people.
it'll be too late.
Right.
Yeah, no, the regular people won't run to the mines fast enough. And we're here, we know this. So.
Right.
But I think what's funny is like what you were just saying about eugenics. Like if you hire a Nazi to be in charge of your war room, you're going to end up with. It shouldn't be surprising that you're going to end up with a Nazi solution at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And especially with the alien hand syndrome or alien limb syndrome, and like the fact that he is a former Nazi scientist, the fact that the fact that he keeps slipping into the I know, right? So like we can pretend like that stuff isn't around anymore, right? But like maybe the reality is like eugenics never really goes away. Like trying to say one group of people is superior to another because of their genes, right? It's still very much a part of things. Maybe. So what do we do? we love the bomb in the end and just make peace with it, or that if it happens, it happens, and at least we all go together? Or do we use this to make more informed choices about how we select our leaders or the policies that get put in place? Or, I don't know, do we just start digging bomb shelters in the basement, you think, and stockpiling?
Not deep enough.
Hunker in your bunker? I don't know. Is there anything? Where do we go from here? Because we've gone to that dark, deep place where everything's bad and nothing's going to happen that's good ever again. So, the youth, you're the hope for the future. How do we fix this? You see these old people, they messed it all up, right? So, how do we fix this, guys?
Make a supercomputer that's programmed so that it can only do good and put it in charge.
But who decides what's good?
Supercomputer's good too.
Make it that can analyze what's best, what would be like the best for the survival of humanity. I don't know.
I don't know, because I feel like that was partially their mistake with this.
That's Skynet.
Yeah,
I
Skynet.
don't think we're so much
No, but-
smarter than
So maybe we aren't that much smarter than they are. Maybe we all
There is
joke
no good
about.
solution.
Maybe we all talk about like our leaders, our government, are like being idiots, right? But maybe like we should like take a look in the mirror and think about like what that says about us, right? And that regardless of your political affiliation, right? Like I don't know, right? Like we let these people speak for us, and I don't know. Yeah, and then yeah, and then yeah.
There's a really great article right before the 2016 election that Henry Rollins wrote. It's like, it's obvious who's going to be the president. He's like, the most famous actress is Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
He's like, everything follows everything else. Like,
Yeah.
so what you're saying, when I watch this movie, you don't see any solution in the movie itself.
Yeah.
The solution is to look at the movie and understand, like, okay, well, Slim Pickens might have been the most intelligent character in the movie, or Mandrake.
Yeah.
And, like, those are obviously the people who should be president, not anybody else.
But
like,
those are the people that are smart enough not to want the job.
well, yeah, or don't have an ego big enough.
How many
to
times
run.
did George Washington refuse the presidency? Several. I can't think the exact same number, but he
And
kept
be
saying
king.
no,
And refused
right?
to be king.
And
Yeah, well, he
king.
refused to be king. But originally we had the Articles of Confederation. He's like, it's not going to work. I don't want to be in charge of this. Like, it's not going to work. And states' rights became an issue.
States' rights is always an issue.
Always an
Oh my
issue,
God.
yeah.
Still.
Still, yeah, it never goes away. The problems in the beginning are the problems that are always going to be there. Especially if you don't really address them.
But you have to have some sort of consensus on how to address them, and we can't seem to arrive at that.
Because our culture is schizophrenic, right? And divided against itself. And sports team mentality. And we're pointing fingers at the people on the other teams and telling them they suck, right? Like,
Well, yeah, but that also starts from the top.
trickle down.
The only way you can really control the situation is to control the thinking. And to constantly say, oh, it's fake news, when the news is theoretically telling the truth, and oh, it's the other side. I mean, and because you've pretty much bred out the ability for critical thinking, so you have a population that will just follow.
Yeah. It's the British guy who can think critically. It's, well, I guess Slim
You're not
Pickens
American,
also.
oh my God.
Seriously, it's a problem. I mean,
They're the most outsiders, right? There's a British guy who's not the American there, and there's a Texan,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is its own country. So,
It was,
and
right?
those are the two most free-thinking people in the thing. Like,
That's true. What you had said prior to that, remind me of, and then I'll get you. Like, the president does not shape culture. The president is a reflection of culture. These movies do not shape our cultures. They reflect, like, aspects of our culture. Yeah, go ahead.
So I see kind of like two takeaways you could have. One is that it's saying that almost the stupid is inevitable. It just
It's like Idiocracy almost?
Yeah, like human nature is it's going to escalate.
Yeah.
But the other one is that there's a lot of points in this movie where if you just questioned authority, it would have gone in a different direction. Because as much as like it's a Doomsday Machine, it's also like a Rube Goldberg machine scenario, where like all these pieces had to come together at like the right moments in order for it to go off, and any person could have gotten involved.
It's a comedy
at
of
any point.
errors. You know, perfect
Yeah, it's
storm.
very, very dramatic
Yeah.
irony a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
Also, like, knowing like what the other side has is important because like if the premiere hadn't loved his surprises, then like this probably wouldn't have happened because like they wouldn't have done it. But like also like yeah.
Yeah. So like if you're gonna develop these terrible weapons, you should tell people about them at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that caught my eye just before was that if you think about it, if it was the Americans that had the Doomsday Machine, and not the Russians, but you can also think of it as the Russians too, what in the world makes you think that the contractor actually gave you something that works?
That's true.
I mean,
Right.
there's no way to test it.
Well, it gets
Right.
questioned. Mr. President, this sounds like a commie trick. I don't know. You know, like he's constantly
No,
like,
but they
yeah,
believe it.
yeah, they do ultimately,
Right.
because it's like in good faith. You know, if it wasn't a friendly call, I wouldn't have made the call at all. Okay, Sunday is circling up. Okay. Cool. Final thoughts? Or you want to talk about something weird or crazy? Is this why we think he faked the moon landing, Stanley Kubrick? Yeah.
Possibly.
So final thoughts, conclusions, whatever you think, yeah.
Yeah, just because I don't know.
Oh,
Was the movie fail-safe before or after this?
comes out right before, but is being made in parallel,
Oh, okay.
I believe.
No, because a lot of the
Yeah.
shots and everything are,
Similar.
Is failsafe based on the same book? I don't know, but it was definitely being developed like in tandem, and that was one of the reasons why this becomes a comedy,
okay.
right? Because originally it's written, Strangelove is written as like a serious
serious film.
piece, right? Kubrick doesn't think it works, but also it's because this other movie is coming out about the same thing, so this makes it separate and maybe more sellable in their minds.
In somebody's mind anyway.
Somebody's mind.
Yeah.
Same guy who said Peter Sellers needs to play 4 people. All right, fine, just 3 then. Yeah.
I think it's weird because the movie kind of wants to make you question, like, the role of leadership or whether you should be trusting your leaders. Mm-hmm. And so in America, you have, like, the First Amendment and free speech. Mm-hmm. Stanley Kubrick's made other movies questioning governments, like he did Paths to Glory, which was banned in France because it questioned their leadership in World War I. But in America, they just let this movie come out, and it still didn't change anything.
Yeah.
Like, I think that what's fascinating is that, like, it doesn't matter that you can see this movie. They still elect the same crazy people to, like, it's not like it ended the Cold War. It was like, this should be a wake up that, like, oh, the Cold War could get out of hand. We could all die.
Yeah.
It was made at a time when people were really afraid of that happening. And absolutely nothing happened, which is strange because and the government, who this movie's directly targeted at, didn't care, let it come out, showed the entire country, and they're like, there's nothing you can do about this.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great, like, commentary on, like,
Well, yeah.
the inevitability of this kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't matter if you know that that's what the president, or even if you imagine or ridicule the president, it's still got to happen. It's not like you can stop fighting the Russians.
Yeah.
They definitely will kill you if you put your guns down.
Okay.
I mean, like, that's, you know,
Yeah.
they had plans for that. I mean, so, like, it was kind of weird. Like, there was a lot of inevitability stuff in this movie. And yet, at the same time, it, like, really played out in the real world. And what's interesting about, like, movies and stuff is that other movies he made where you criticize governments are banned. Like, if this movie were made the exact opposite, but in Russia, it wouldn't have come out in Russia.
Sure, yeah.
The premier would have never allowed this movie to actually occur in Russia. In America, they let this movie come out, and they were like, whatever, it's not going to change anything.
Well, yeah, that goes back to the whole, like, we know we're electing selfish idiots, right? But we keep electing selfish idiots, right? Like, we know it, like, we see it, we keep going through the cycle, but then, like, we keep making that same mistake. And you see that at the end of the movie where, like, oh, the mine shaft gap, right? We're making that same mistake again, thinking everything's a competition. Like, mutually assured destruction should show us we're all in it together, maybe, right? Like, we're all gonna die together. Maybe we should start living together, too. 1 and 2. Yeah, you're 1.
Tag, I'm it, all right.
Yep.
No, but it did have a little bit of an effect because I think the SALT treaties, the first
SALT
of the
one, right?
SALT 1, I
Okay.
think, was during Nixon administration.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Nixon was busy doing his foreign policy, you know. Oh, yes. Really, I don't know what you're talking about for that.
I read Watchmen with my seniors in one of my English classes, and like, then we watched the movie, and like, they're like, who's that guy? And like, Kissinger and Nixon are characters in it, Also, I'm reminded of the Venture Brothers, where there's a character based on Henry Kissinger. He's called Henry Killinger, and he goes, "This is my magic murder bag." I don't know, it's a good character. You should check it out. It's definitely saying something about Kissinger. But Kissinger tells Nixon in Watchmen, he's like, "You need to be the madman Richard Nixon. Show them who they should fear." That's my Kissinger, by the way. It's not good. But with Kissinger, we may see some Strangelove, right? But Strangelove predates Kissinger, at least being involved in government on that level.
Right.
By about 5 years.
5 years, right?
This was right before Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
No, you're
64.
kind of in
No, Vietnam's
Vietnam, sort
happening.
of,
It
yeah.
just started, right?
Yeah.
65 was the first big battle.
Okay.
64 was like the troops going in. 63, I mean, Kennedy said
63 was advisors.
advisors. Quezon was in 65.
We'll get to Vietnam eventually. I feel like.
Yeah, you like that.
we'll give it its fair take also.
But, SALT 1 being the lip service that it was,
Yeah.
it was, there was an effect.
There was,
Okay.
there was a public.
Drive for a SALT treaty? I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember.
Proper lip service, yes.
Okay.
The idea was out there.
There,
But
there was an idea for nuclear disarmament.
Well,
Yeah,
no, we should look like we're doing that, yes.
Or at least, what was it? It was
Posturing.
de-escalating? It was like a limitation treaty, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
It was
wasn't
limitation, it wasn't,
A, limitation treaty.
SALT 2
Strategic
is-
Arms Limitation Treaty.
right.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Is reducing, right? SALT 2 is trying to get
Yeah,
rid
I don't
of.
know, I forget which one wasn't, it
Okay.
wasn't signed by one of the sides, and I forget if it
SALT
was
2.
us or them that
SALT 2
didn't
was
sign
Reagan.
it, but.
Okay. Reagan, yeah. SALT 2 was Reagan. I keep
They
on-
all run together after a while.
But Reagan had Star Wars.
Yeah. Star Wars.
And
We're gonna
shiny
put a big
pebbles.
laser in
Strategic
We're gonna put
space.
laser
Defense
beams in
initiative.
space.
Yeah. We're there again, by the way, right?
Yep.
I'm sure
So
we're
Space Force.
yeah, with the Space Force, yeah.
We need a good theme song.
Everything that's old is new again.
Galaxy
I guess
Quest.
you can use Starfleet, it's copywritten.
I know, we took
It's
the
really just
logo.
Starfleet.
I know, we're using that logo. It's actually, the Space Force is like marketing for that Picard show on CBS All
Yeah,
Access.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, it's subliminal advertising for that.
Yeah, there's something very Star Trek about it too.
Can somebody tell
Star
me,
Trek isn't very Star Trek about it anymore, though.
Yeah.
can somebody tell me why the uniforms for the Space Force are camo? I'm so confused.
They should be sequin and glittery or something
yes.
to blend in with the stars.
It'll be fabulous.
All right, final thoughts. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
And we didn't get
The
into
music
that.
in this is great.
Music in this is great. A lot of like slow love songs in the beginning and the end. I think of specifically. But what Johnny Come Marching Home is the drum thing that we
This
hear.
goes through like the entire
Well, and
movie.
also Johnny, we hardly knew you.
Yeah, because that's the other thing that
Yeah.
uses the same music, and because there's no lyrics, we don't know if it's
Well, if you look at the two bombs, the text on the back of the bombs, I believe.
"Hello there,
One is
dear John."
One's dear. The one that's dear John is like a letter to like an injured soldier,
Yeah.
which is the Johnny we hardly knew ye, and the other
Okay.
one is the one where you're welcoming a soldier home victorious from battle.
Yeah. Well, and also, "Dear John" is usually what they call the letter where you're
Yeah.
breaking up with your soldier boyfriend. Those are hard to write. Yeah, no, I like that, and that's a good choice. And again, it's the paradox, because which is it? Is it one? Is it the other? Is it both? You know. And I think when you see the names on the bombs, it's both. You know, like all of this is both. Are nukes going to protect us or kill us? Both, right? Like, and ultimately, the kill us part is probably the one we should focus on more, but it is both a little bit. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Last thoughts?
Humans are morons.
What?
You had it earlier. I think.
Yeah, I think it's "Dear John" and then "Hello there." We can go back in time for a second.
Hi there.
Hi there. Okay. It's this one. Hi there and "Dear John." Yeah. So it's like "Hello, goodbye." Right? Like a "Dear John" is a goodbye letter, so it's like "Hello, goodbye." Hello and goodbye. Yeah. So I mean, whole movie paradox, and maybe we can make that claim about Kubrick in general. But we shall see.
Well, I think that's what makes his movies good, is that they're ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of them
On
end
a lot of
ambiguously.
levels.
Objective art, you know, it's open to interpretation.
I put a lot of parallels with this movie in like, to what's it called, Clockwork Orange. And how he changed the ending to be like completely ambiguous. Because the end of the book,
Yep. No
Yeah,
chapter
and-
21 in America. Only chapter up to 20.
right, at the
Yeah.
end of the book, it was like, oh, well,
Spoilers. All right, I know what you're gonna say. Save it for
Anyway,
another
yeah,
time.
so that he makes the movie an ambiguous
There's a
ending,
reason.
and this movie ends up ambiguous, but that's what makes the movies good. Is
Yeah.
it's not like he's telling you what the answer is.
Yeah,
or
he's
not even giving an opinion what the answer is. He's just showing you what it is.
There was another quote. I feel like I'm full of quotes, and I don't remember who said any of these quotes today. But there's another quote where it's like, films aren't meant to fill up your cups; they're meant to light your fires, right? And they're not gonna give you the answers. They're gonna inspire you to go and find the answers for yourself, right? They're gonna give you the questions, and you're gonna go and find them on your own. And maybe that's what we can say with this. And I might be butchering the metaphor. Don't get me wrong. It's already mixed metaphor to begin with. Fill up your cup, light your fire. Those don't work together, but you get it. All right, so thank you all for being here. I know for some of us it was a little more of a struggle than others, so I appreciate us all for being here. We're really nothing without you, right? You guys are the thing that makes this thing great, and we would be nothing without you. So in season 2, next time we'll be meeting is in July. I believe it's July 11th, because the first Friday is July 3rd, and I think because I can't hear anything on this, but I can hear the people are like talking. So I know I'll tell you the date in a second because I'll change it. But we're gonna watch some Kubrick movies. We did a poll, so next time we'll get a little ultraviolet and we'll talk about Clockwork Orange.
I
July
finally get
10th.
to see it.
We'll talk about that on July 10th.
I've never seen
so
it.
I was wrong. It's not July 11th.
Good luck.
It's a rough one. So we'll see. I told someone we're gonna do the good ones, and you might disagree, but we're gonna try to do the good Kubricks. Okay, so next time,
So that means we're not
Clockwork
doing
Orange.
Ice
Let's give
White
each other a round of applause. Thank you very much.